I wanted to talk today about what's wrong with political correctness. You know, when you think of political correctness, you think of diversity and inclusivity and equality. And you might think, well, these are self-evidently good things. Political correctness is really, isn't it just about acting in a decent way, being a good kind of person, being fair to other people, being someone who would be welcoming to everybody, treating people with respect, basically having good manners. And who could possibly object to that? And the answer to that is, I think that nobody could object to any of those things. No one sensible or personable, I think, at any rate. What you need to be able to understand is that all of these things are valuable and important qualities that individuals need to learn to accept. We should be welcoming to everyone in a diverse way and allow a diversity of views, opinions and peoples, backgrounds, cultures to take a part in our society and the way in which we live. We all benefit from the enrichment of that. Inclusivity. We should allow people to take part in things. You shouldn't be exclusive in that respect. That can be very prejudicial and very discriminatory. And equality. Very hard to argue against equality. I think equality is one of those fundamental principles which everybody recognises at a very intuitive level, that it's the right thing to be equal to and treat people in an equal way. So the question becomes, how can you possibly be against political correct views which really do no more than champion good manners, good behaviour, fairness and honesty? Well, I do have a difficulty with it. And the difficulty I have is that, you know, you can have some things which claim to be one thing, but are in fact something quite different. And if we have real and genuine diversity and inclusivity and equality, then I would be the first person to support all of those. But what I'm looking at here when I hear people talk about those things is something which is quite different from what's listed on the box, if you like. What's inside the tin is not what's on the label. And it's what George Orwell pointed out in his important book 1984, something he called newspeak. Newspeak was the idea that you could say one thing but actually mean pretty well the exact opposite. He also spoke of doublethink as well. He introduced lots of interesting terms which are very important for us to understand today, so we don't get taken in by things. I am not keen on political correctness because I think it takes in people by simply labelling something on a tin, which when you open it, you find inside it's quite a different thing. Let's take diversity. Diversity is great, provided that in the common way of talking about it, you're one of the protected groups. Certain groups of people are protected based upon sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, age, disability. That's great. Let's include a wide, diverse number of people from all those groups. But let's not limit our diversity or understanding of diversity to just those groups. Because what happens then is you end up with people who have only think the same way. There's no diversity of thought, for example. If you take a different opinion from many people who have these views, then you're not being sufficiently diverse, and you're often not part of the group. We can't have a diversity. In fact, the diversity which we often have really amounts to no more than essentially people who look different and have different backgrounds, but all think exactly the same. And I think that's an important point for us to understand. Diversity does not include diversity of opinion. Diversity does not include diversity of viewpoint. It doesn't include people who have a different point of view from you. And so it's not real diversity in my book. It's a kind of fake, superficial diversity. It's only the diversity of what is appearance, but there's no real diversity of opinion and viewpoint. And in fact, when we say that companies and any organisation really benefits from diversity, that doesn't really mean that you benefit from the real benefit is coming not from people who are different sex or different genders, but people who are genuinely diverse in their thoughts. By bringing a whole range of different viewpoints to play, then you can have real dialogue, and then you can have a real interesting discussion, and then you can find out what the best ideas are. And ideas are not grounded in one's appearance or one's genetics. Ideas are grounded in the way you think, and having different viewpoints are very important for true diversity. Take inclusion. Inclusion, again, is something which everyone should naturally agree with. We don't wish to exclude anybody from taking part in society or any aspects of society. But unfortunately, the inclusion that is spoken of in terms of political correctness, you're only included if you're on the in-group. If you're in one of these protected groups, very often you have special treatment. But if you're not one of these special in-groups, then you're not necessarily included. People don't go out of their way to include people who don't fall into these categories. You might be suffering discrimination because you're ginger-haired, but you're not included in the in-group because that's not one of the protected groups. So there's no real inclusivity here. And take equality. Again, everyone should agree with equality. But what kind of equality are we talking about here? I think the equality of opportunity is absolutely fantastic. Everyone should have the same opportunities to make the same way in life. In fact, that's part of what might have been called the American dream. The fact that anybody can make it, even to President of the United States of America. Yeah, great. But equality, as understood in political correctness terms, is not about equality of opportunity. It's about making sure that there are equalities, say, for every level in a company. You might say, let's take equality of sex. How many men, how many females have you got in your organisation? And if you don't have completely representative numbers, then the conclusion from that is that all divergence from those equal numbers is due to discrimination. There's no accounting here for personal choice or for personal preference or for individuals to make a choice different from this randomized element, which is often thought of as being the goal to aim for. But that's not necessarily the case here. I think what you need to bear in mind is that people will make their own choices about their own kinds of things. And if you want to impose a structure, then you have to do it by quotas. If you want to impose an equality of outcome, you have to impose quotas on the number of males or females, the number of black or white, the number of people of one race versus another race. And if you end up putting quotas in, what kind of society does that produce? It produces a very unfair one. I mean, what kind of world would we be thinking of if we were trying to put quotas on everybody in order to provoke what we might consider a kind of diversity or fairness? In reality, it's not a diversity or fairness. Diversity, equality, and inclusion are not as they're labelled on the tin. And that's the problem here. I think, to sum it all up, I find that political correctness is really founded upon an hypocrisy. And that really sums up for me the problems that I have with a philosophy like political correctness. On the outside, it speaks of things which are very fine and very good, but on the inside, it's full of the opposite of diversity. which is very narrowness, the opposite of inclusivity, which is exclusivity, and the opposite of real equality, which is a kind of inequality. And so it's masquerading as something which it really isn't. And that's my real objection to it. It's basically a hypocritical religion of a kind. And for that reason, it's not something which I go along with.